Dudes like Houdini. Seriously, when the going gets tough, you don't want a criminal lawyer, right? You want a criminal lawyer. Know what I'm saying?
Saul, Saul, you better call Saul. He'll fight for your rights when your back's to the wall. Take it to the man, justice for all. You better call Saul. You best call now, you hear?
And we're live with the Journey with Jimmy podcast.
Hey,
It's your host, Willer. Slippin' Willer.
slipping. Yep.
It's your not host, Bradley.
And this is your poor student boy Joe over here. I don't got any funny today. So
Joe always knows.
Joe just
Yeah.
has school projects to do. And that's it.
I'll be here.
We have terrible news to share with you all. I lost our previous recording of Better Call Saul, which consisted of 4 episodes. We talked about 4 episodes, and I lost them all. And I feel horrible about it. I'm a fraud. But we keep on trucking. We slip, but we get up. So
All of you longtime listeners to the Journey with Jimmy
to the
series.
second episode of the goddamn you know what? In all of the podcasts we've done, I've yet to screw up that badly, except that one time I recorded without my headphones in. But like, we've been pretty good, all things considered.
Yeah, it
so.
could be a lot worse because I feel like a lot of like Let's Play channels, at least once a month, in one of their episodes, they'll be like, yeah, we fucked up a recording or something." So I think we do pretty good.
We do. We're very much amateurs. So, all right.
Amateur.
To rectify this, I'm going to very quickly go over the main point of each episode to just jog our minds, and then we can just talk real quick and move on.
Yeah, because I think like I remember the main points I wanted to hit on in some of the previous episodes, like what I really liked about them. So
Without further ado, 1-4 was episode Hero. The main part of Hero was Jimmy doing the billboard stunt near the end. It also had the scenes of Jimmy going to the hearing because he was trying to copy Hamlin in the billboard, etc., etc. Fun episode, just goes to show you how far Jimmy's willing to go.
yeah, I remember one of the things I really loved about this episode was the little opening vignette. Would you call it a vignette? I don't know.
It's a cold open.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this in the first episode of the podcast where Vince Gilligan likes to do these little cold opens, either jumping ahead in time and rolling it back, or just showing a kind of separate story that happened at a different place and time than the main story. So I really liked this one where Jimmy and some companion, they find a wallet next to a guy, like a drunk guy passed out in the street. And this is Jimmy and who we later find out to be his friend pulling I was about to say a prank. It's a scam on this.
It's a hard hustle.
Yeah, on this guy using this fake Rolex. And it was really fun at the time I watched it, just to get a peek into, Slippin' Jimmy at his prime.
Yeah.
And for the most part, it was just fun. But when we got to near the end of the episode, it really hit me why they chose to include this scene. And I really like it because the core of this scam is making this watch appear to be more valuable than it actually is. And in a sense, Jimmy does a lot of that to himself in this episode.
Yeah.
He kind of scams the city into thinking he's better than he is.
I'm glad you brought this up because that's definitely the best stuff we talked about for this episode.
I think a little bit of tidbit information was like you also told us that that scene was like a last second filming that they did.
Yes.
which I think is interesting considering the end of this series and or this season, how it ends. I feel like
Yeah.
you really needed that original scene to really understand what's happening later and kind of bring it all full circle.
Maybe it was a
But-
scene where they're like, if we ever have a short episode, this is a
Yeah.
slot in scene that we can put in.
I think that's another long running thing with Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul.
Yeah.
There are some scenes or episodes where I'll be like, man, that's one of my favorite ones. I really enjoyed that, and then I'll later find out either from Willer or the like official podcast that they're like, yeah, we just kind of showed up and we didn't know what we were going to be doing that day, so we just kind of rolled with it, man.
Kind of, yeah. Moving along to 1-5, Alpine Shepherd Boy. The main points to hit here is Chuck gets arrested in the beginning and he gets tased. The Jimmy plot line is mostly him going to all of those people who reached out to his ad, and most of them are crazy, but he finds a nice niche in elder law. And then you get the scenes with Chuck in the hospital where you get the clarification on his disease. And it ends transitioning into the Mike interlude, which is the next episode.
If you get nothing else from this episode, you need to get the hilarious talking toilet scene. Give it to me.
Put it in me, Chandler. This very important for Chuck's reveal here of his disease, but not much else that I would say here. We good to move? Yeah.
Yeah.
1-6, Mike interlude, just all Mike all day. Him and his
Mike Enos.
no, it's not his daughter, it's his
Granddaughter.
No,
stepdaughter.
Granddaughter,
daughter-in-law.
daughter-in-law, that's the word. Thank you.
There you go.
And how he comes clean about how Mike helped in the corruption of his son, which led to his death, and then he took revenge on the two cops. And he's getting in trouble for it in current day.
I remember one discussion we had about this episode in the Forbidden Lost to the Ages recording.
Ooh.
Was we talked about how all three of us kind of have a different point of view going into the show. So, Willer and I, who had watched Breaking Bad, I think we were a lot more interested to see this episode just because we love Mike. And Joe, who, might like the character Mike as he's shown in Better Call Saul, you were a lot more excited to get back to Jimmy, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's really cool because I don't know how many people are watching Better Call Saul without watching the other series. So it's cool to see how an episode like this stands on its own without the context of the other series.
Fun update to that. I have seen one other person on a YouTube comment on a video comparing some of the stuff Better Call Saul does over Breaking Bad. And they were like, wait, what? There was a previous show? So
Well,
there's another one out there.
All right, what's up?
Time to cancel.
1-7 is episode Bingo. This kind of closes off that Mike storyline with him and Jimmy returning the notebook that they stole in that previous episode. And it also has the heist that they pull on the Kettleman to get the money back, and it just feels really good to get Jimmy to win. But at the end of the episode, he is forced to give back all the money, so his dreams of starting that practice with Kim are set back as a result.
Yeah, this is like the end to the Kettleman saga, right?
I'd say so, yeah. The legendary Kettleman saga.
Yeah, this is funny.
Kettleman
This
arc.
comes right before the Frieza saga.
Yeah.
No, this is funny because for the upcoming episodes, while I was watching them, I made the joke to Willer, and I wouldn't call it an accurate joke, but I was like, "Oh, and Better Call Saul is the monetary amount of a legal case, like someone's power level." So you have Jimmy dealing with like all these like really little small time elder cases, but like, oh, the big one, like the big bad, that's the Kettleman case. That's like what
Yeah.
we're trying to tackle. So he defeats that here, and then we're about to go into the next arc where it's
Bigger
potentially
numbers.
where it's potentially like 20 million or something.
I will say the true power level in Better Call Saul, and you might have gotten a glimpse of this, is how much you can stick to your own ideals and how successful you are at that. And we'll see we'll see how that plays out as we move on to the actual first episode of discussion, 1-8 Rico. So, a little bit of an update to how we're going to handle these. This is going to be a little more apparent, I think, next time we record, because I started doing it more for season 2, because I'm a little ahead of my rewatch here. I'm going to read scene summaries a little faster, and sometimes multiple scenes at once, and then we can pick and choose what we want to discuss in there as we see fit, just to speed it up like 10 to 20% if possible. But this episode opens up with a banger that I kind of want to dive into immediately, which is the scene in HHM in the mailroom. Jimmy and Kim are not lawyers yet. They're just working there. However, Jimmy just passed the bar, and he asks Chuck if he can work with them, and he's like, "Oh, I'll need an office next to yours and all that." And Chuck is surprised that Jimmy passed in his phony school of University of America Samoa or something.
I know. My cousins lived in American Samoa for like 2 or 3 years.
That's not true.
It is true, actually.
Oh, interesting.
Damn.
If you've noticed, Jimmy and Kim have worn sweatshirts from that school, and that's like a popular merch that you can get for Better Call Saul.
That's neat.
Oh man, that makes things so much more shittier later. But go ahead.
Yeah. So yeah, just whenever Kim finds out, she kisses Jimmy, so they're in good terms here.
Very good terms.
And you get the scene of Jimmy being rejected by Howard, and it's completely without audio. And okay, so what was your first opinions on Howard breaking the news on Jimmy's celebration day? He even takes the cake with him.
They did a really good job here, because I was still firmly in the fuck Howard camp.
Yeah.
God, I'm trying to remember back when I watched this. I think at this, I felt more like tragic and sad towards Jimmy than I felt any content towards Howard. Because I could definitely see it from Howard's perspective. It's like, I can't just hire your brother from just without having any kind of like previous like law experience or anything. So I'll go break the news to him. And like, I just saw it as more as like Jimmy's not ready yet kind of scenario, and Howard was trying to kind of be the bigger man and take Chuck's place and telling him that.
Yeah. Well, we find out, later we find that out. But as you're watching the scene, you don't understand that, and Howard is written in a way where you're not supposed to know what kind of role he takes, because he sounds like the antagonist, and he feels like the antagonist leading up to this point, but there was a stealth antagonist that you didn't know about that's revealed later.
The real hidden boss.
Yeah.
Yeah. The one really cool thing in this scene is, it's presented where we are viewing Howard break the news to Jimmy from outside of the break room. And while he's actually breaking the news to Jimmy, we don't hear what they're saying. It's mostly silent, except for this copy machine going off in the foreground. And I was taking special care to look at the copy machine. I couldn't quite tell if it was just that the pages were upside down or if the pages were blank. But either way, I found this interesting. And, I don't know how my interpretation of this is going to change as the show goes on. But at this point, I was still coming off the previous 1 or 2 episodes where Jimmy did the whole scheme where he was trying to copy HHM. So this scene where he's getting rejected from HHM, this copy machine is just going off constantly. So I kind of made a mental connection there.
That's cool.
But I don't know. I wanted to see if you guys could glean any meaning from that.
I did not make that connection. I feel like the way I view it, the copy machine is what Jimmy spent a lot of time working on, and it's kind of like a droning sound, a repetitive sound of what his future is still going to be, because they don't accept him as a lawyer. So he's still just the mailroom boy. and that droning sound of the copy machine, I feel like reinforces that.
I like that. I like that one better.
Pretty good. I like yours too. Joe, what do you like? Oh, Joe, I can't hear you anymore.
I muted myself because I was eating an airhead.
You bastard.
I think the copy machine represents Jimmy's sexuality, and
All right, moving
I
on.
think Joe's right.
yeah. But anyways, I want to readdress that. The reason why I think when I first watched the scene, to me it was more of an experience thing, more than anything, is that Howard walks out saying, "Let's reassess this in 6 months." Like, let's see after 6 months after you doing work, let's see what this looks like.
That's so well written, though, because it could go both ways. It could be Howard being genuine, which I believe he was after knowing.
Right.
But it's also written in a dismissive way where it's like, just so I don't crush you completely, let's reassess in 6 months, but I'm not really going to. It could be viewed that way.
I understand it, but from my takeaway when I first was watching it, it was just more of a Howard doesn't want to bring on someone that is brand new, and maybe doesn't like Jimmy either. But like, I can see where his positioning on this is currently.
We're gonna jump into the next few scenes here because we get this press conference scene, and then Jimmy visiting Miss Landry. You get returning to Chuck's house where Jimmy left the documents and Chuck went over the documents, and you also have the solicitation at Sandpiper where Jimmy serves them with a toilet roll. So one thing I really like in this batch of scenes is when Jimmy doesn't take the money from Miss Landry. I think there is so many good scenes of Jimmy having proper humanity and charisma, and I feel like that's what really sets him apart from Walter White, because after season 1, there's hardly ever that many scenes of Walt being friendly or reasonable or just good-natured at all. And it's kind of tragic then, because you can cheer for Walter, but you know he's in the wrong most of the times. But Jimmy, you get the sense that he's still such a good guy at heart, but he just gets into these situations that are heartbreaking.
Yeah, he, like, for the most part, he really is trying to do things the right way. It's when he gets kind of pushed into a corner that he has to get dirty.
Yeah. And as for the when Chuck is going over the documents, Chuck missed the overcharging, but Jimmy caught it. So it goes to show you that even when it comes to normal lawyering, Jimmy has it in him.
Man, Jimmy's really good at lawyering. Chuck should put in a good word for him, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they're brothers.
Yeah.
Let's see. I kind of really like this because it provides a good like kind of like final climax. Because if I remember correctly, when they first made this season, they didn't know they were going to get more than one season. They just wanted to make this one season,
which is why this season ends on a weird note. Like the last scene is a bit odd when you look back.
Yeah, it's just a very defiant Jimmy at the end.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, okay. But it does kind of like show you the catalyst of someone that's so close to being good and what could potentially push them to go over the edge.
Big themes.
Yeah.
Also, I have evidence to submit. Joe's really got me thinking about Light when I watched this show, because he's brought up so many scenes with Light. In this scene where where Chuck couldn't find the overcharging, they're both relatively equally lit, I guess. Like, usually one of them is standing more in the darkness. I feel like...
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe that's a little reachy.
I think you're right there.
Yeah, I'd say so. You get a little bit of Mike and Stacy. I kind of spoiled this when we talked about it last time, but Stacy does forgive him for murdering 2 cops. Because, I mean, Stace is very much like a fuck anyone who killed Maddie. So she's very much a vigilante in spirit. So she's fine with it. And this is nice because now it gives Mike a motivation of truly providing for the family that he has left. And let's see where that takes him.
Who's this fucking Michael Douglas character?
Michael Douglas?
The Sandpiper lawyer.
Oh, dude, he's so good. Schweikert, I think is his name. Rich Schweikert. So you get the dumpster diving scene with Jimmy. You cannot say that Jimmy doesn't give it his all because he's in the
Yeah.
trash digging, taking phone calls from Schweikert, who is only giving him the time of the day because of Chuck. He's like, "Oh, I thought you might be related, so that's why I'm not just destroying your ass right now."
I think also during this phone call that they're having, it's a great juxtaposition of fucking this guy is up in his swanky office on like some high rise, and he's talking, he's all clean, and then there's Jimmy literally in the dumpster digging around, just covered in shit. And like, and meanwhile, one of them's talking shit, and the other one's trying to find it.
So, in this scene, Jimmy
Mm-hmm.
finds what he was actually looking for in the cleaner bin right next to the bin he was diving in. I can't
Yeah.
help but think that's some symbolism of Jimmy taking the dirty road for what the answer was also just was in the clean bin right next to him, but he had to get himself dirty to find
Yeah.
that answer. I feel like that's pretty emblematic of Jimmy's character and character arc.
Mm-hmm.
You get the scenes of Jimmy restoring the documents with Chuck, as well as Jimmy calling Kim to help for the printing. Nice to see the brothers working together. I'm sure it's gonna turn out great for them.
They'll start their own company, M&M's.
M&M's. You get Mike and Kaylee, and then more Mike and Stace. Stace is cool, just taking money from Mike. She's like, and Mike is like, if this money. Actually, it's not. Mike is not giving her money yet, but he says you can use the money that Maddie left behind, even if it's dirty, because it will do something good for you and Kaylee.
Oh, okay.
And then you get the meeting at Chuck's, where all the lawyers show up and they have to discard all their electronics, as you do when you enter Chuck. So there's that level of respect between them. And Chuck is kind of quiet until he hears something that sparks his mind, and then he raises the ask or like the price that they're suing for. I don't know the technical term. He raises it from 2 million to 20 million. And he's just completely serious about it. And talk about number power levels. This is a lot more than the Kettleman case. So we're dealing with a huge ass RICO case, big money, and
It took me a very long time to figure out what was going on. I did do some research into like why the fuck the needles were important.
something about
It's because they're purchasing them out of the state,
yeah, they mentioned that.
and because they are using a product that's out of the state and upcharging it, it becomes a federal crime because it has to do with
State between state.
state trade rather than interstate trade. Because states are more like European countries than they are like part of a county in the United States. So they have their own trade borders and everything.
And the episode ends with Chuck walking outside. So we've had this running theory on this podcast of what Chuck's illness means in relation to Jimmy. What do we need to reevaluate that? As he's working so hard and he's so distracted that he's able to walk outside without even knowing. What do y'all think of this?
So I think part of it now is him coming to realization, or him like subconsciously like acknowledging Jimmy as like an actual lawyer, basically, and recognizing his skill and his drive and his ability to get things done. Because it definitely gets, and that shows up later, and at the very end of this whole like three chapters here, where Chuck is essentially reverted back to where he was after Jimmy leaves him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bradley, what you got? You got anything?
So this was more impactful to me because of that stuff Joe brought up, where Chuck's condition is kind of representative of how he's viewing Jimmy at the moment. Because we talked about that in the first episode, or Joe brought it up in the first episode, and at the time I hadn't quite had that thought yet. So now that Joe kind of planted that in my mind, that made this more impactful. And overall, it just kind of made me happy and hopeful.
Yeah.
I know earlier in the episode, Chuck was using like an electric lantern And he's used regular lanterns in the past, I think.
Yeah, we've seen at least 3 flashbacks of pre-illness Chuck.
Yeah. So in this episode, he was using an electric lantern, and I was like, "Oh, that's a step in the right direction." So I was kind of hoping
I thought
he
it was
would-
the kerosene lantern still. I might be wrong. But
Yeah, wait. In present time, he has not started using
I don't.
any.
It looked like a very LED lantern.
No, those big bright lanterns he uses are actually kerosene or.
Okay, I was about to say. In
yeah,
any case,
it does make you feel good and happy at the
Yeah.
progress. Because Chuck is an ally, right? That's his role in this show. He's just
What a-
helpless. He's just helpless Chuck. You want him to do well.
what a boy.
I want to propose a alternative angle to Joe's angle, but I think they're both equally true. Joe is going at it like how he views Jimmy as a lawyer. Let's suppose that the electricity is how the barriers he puts between Jimmy in a personal relationship, brotherly level. And now that he's working with Jimmy and they're happy and they're getting along completely and they're viewing themselves as equals, suddenly the illness is gone and he's able to walk outside until it hits him.
yeah.
Potentially that could be an angle to go with as well. I think both kind of intermingle to give something of a truth. All right. 1-9, pimiento.
What's pimento mean?
Some say it's the caviar of the South. It's the cheese. It's the cheese in Mike's sandwich later in this episode. All right. You get Chuck and Jimmy outside. Jimmy's really happy for Chuck, and they're just kind of chilling there until Chuck's kind of had enough and he wants to go back in. You get Mike and Stace. He brings a dog. It's mainly an excuse to hang out with Kaylee, but also a excuse to go visit the vet more times because the vet is where he gets his jobs from. And then you get Jimmy versus Coakley,
Yeah.
which I don't quite remember what happens in the scene. I
So
wrote that it's a small victory for Jimmy.
It's putting a restraining order
Right.
on the building against Jimmy, because if there's a restraining order on the building against Jimmy, it means he can't see his clients, and the clients aren't leaving the building because it's an elderly home. So Jimmy's arguing that you can't do that because you're not legally allowing me to visit my clients. You cannot leave this
And
place.
it is a win, but in the next scene, Chuck and Jimmy are getting down to brass tacks, as Jimmy often says, where the reality is that was a softball that they're throwing just to keep you busy, so you don't have time to rest and time to fill the other obligations of the case. And it comes down to a realistic, we don't have enough manpower. And
Yeah.
we can get to Chuck being jealous or manipulative later, but as the facts are, he's 100% right here. Like they
Yeah.
they
I
can't
think-
handle this case.
I agree. I think it's like a 50-50 split after what we know in this episode of like Chuck wanting to give it to his law firm that he works at and work on it, and as well as like we can't do this by ourselves. It's like, yeah, that makes sense. It'd be interesting where this goes.
Yeah.
The silver lining is Jimmy will be working with Chuck at HHM. He'll be out of the mailroom.
Yeah.
And Chuck has a awkward reaction to this. That's a little hard to gauge what he really means. But I wrote the next note is Chuck makes a phone call. And this is the only show that could make that sentence as intimidating as it is.
Just a bunch of like go.
Yeah, a lot of JoJo menacings on this broken man making a phone call because you know it's serious. So now we jump into something a little more lighthearted. Mike and the job, 3-man job, where they have to watch Mr. Daniel Price. Price is just his nephew's name, but he likes it anyways. And this is where the pimento comes from. It's the sandwich that Mike eats here, which is also a little throwback to Breaking Bad. If you'll recall, Bradley, there's a scene where Mike and Jesse are staking out that like meth junkie's house, and Mike is like, yeah, that's the job. We just sit around and wait a long time, but I brought sandwiches.
Hey.
Anyways, the caviar of the South. He takes down Trevor from Grand Theft Auto 5. And then the big guy just runs away, and he's like, all right, I'll do the job alone. And the job is a meeting with Nacho, which is actually a later scene, but we'll just talk about it now. a meeting with Nacho where they're trading these pills from where Price works for money.
I
And
do.
what do y'all think of this Daniel character here?
He's the little slug boy who hired Mike, right?
Yeah, he's Slug Boy.
I mean, I guess you asked what I think of him. I think that I guess that explains what I think of him.
Say no
Oh,
more.
but like in the long run, I mean, it it is a very relevant conversation he has with Mike, where Mike calls him a criminal. He's like, "Well, I'm not a bad guy," and Mike's like, I didn't say
bad
that."
guy. So Bradley, I knew you'd like this one because you like anything that has to do with Worm, and
Yes.
Taylor has said this sentiment beat by beat in Worm. The reason why didn't hit me that hard when I read Worm was because I had already watched this scene, and this goes to the importance of dialogue and how good dialogue is in the show, because it's not only so realistic, it has so much character with how characters speak. The way Mike delivers this sentence just shows so much wisdom and experience from his end, just by the word choice and the tone of his voice. And I love this little
Yeah.
breakdown.
Like, you can tell this is something Mike has really thought about a lot in his life. He's not he will, if he has a job like he had here, he will follow it to completion. But he's not mindlessly doing work like this. He's really thought about his morals and how he feels about doing stuff like this. And I think he's found a mindset where he can be at peace with what he does.
Yeah, pretty much.
I
And
really like this scene where he's just taking the guy's guns and throwing them away in the trash can, like it's just fucking rubbish.
he picks up the Desert Eagle. Is like, oh yeah, you would have a big one like this or whatever. Yeah, it's this is also important because while this might be minor in if there's two main characters to this show, and this is just a side quest for Mike as it is right now, it still has a theme that is prevalent throughout the show, because that theme of good criminals and bad law-abiding people, I think, is a big theme of the show as a whole. So it's a cool storyline to introduce something like that.
I kind of saw it as more of a you can try to like lie to yourself as much as you want, but you're still a criminal regardless of what you do, kind of deal. That's the way that I think Mike, to me, when Mike was telling that, it was more of like, it's like, I know I'm a criminal, like I'm not denying that fact, but I'm not like, it doesn't change who I am, but I'm not going to deny the fact that I am a criminal.
I think it definitely goes the other way, where I feel like Mike has met some scumbag law-abiding people. Do I have to spell it out that we also have a scumbag law-abiding person in this show as well?
I mean,
in
no.
this very episode, actually.
But like the other thing too is that there's the point where Slug Boy starts basically having a breakdown, realizing that he is a criminal, regardless if he is a good person or a bad person. Like he has done crime, he has done a drug deal, he is a criminal. Like forwards and backwards, that's what he is. It doesn't matter like how he goes about his life from now on. He is in fact a criminal.
Mm-hmm. And it's also cool how he resolves himself, where it's like, I can get more pills.
Yeah.
You have to wonder how much he absorbed from it, if he just saw it as like an excuse to get more pills, or if he truly took what Mike saw to heart. Regardless, we skipped over a very important scene, which is Chuck returning to HHM to a standing ovation. He's wearing a suit lined with the space blankets, which what's the symbolism there? There's clearly something, but basically now he can mobilize his fractured relationship with Jimmy and just move around with it.
And man,
mobile Chuck.
We always knew how important Chuck was to the firm, but this like really put it in perspective,
I think this moment where Hamlin is talking on the phone, I forget who he's talking to on the phone, and he's like, yeah, everyone's phone's like, great. I think that really kind of solidified to the point where like Hamlin actually has some respect for Chuck and is actually trying to do everything he can to get Chuck into the building.
Yeah,
Um,
let's gauge that because like Hamlin and Chuck's relationship, because we've been led to think that Hamlin's a bad person, you would also think, oh, he doesn't care about Chuck. Also, the very first conflict of the show is the checks that Hamlin is sending Chuck. So you're like, oh, he doesn't care. But I feel like as the show goes on, you get all of these pieces of information that tell you that they had a good working relationship and they're potentially even friends because he's very respectful when he goes to Chuck's house. So
yeah, they're even like turning off all the power in the entire building.
it's like the
and they could
return of a hero, and he's wearing a goddamn space blanket suit. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
I imagine this show's rewarding on a rewatch because all the scenes of Howard up till this episode and the next probably can be interpreted very differently.
There's stuff in season like 3 and 4 that you can go back to season 1 and be like, oh my god, there was all these hints to stuff, but that's we're not even there yet. We're still in season 1. So Jimmy is offered 20%. They don't want to work with him. Jimmy goes off on Howard while Chuck is sitting there, and it's fascinating because we know the truth. Chuck is the reason why Jimmy is not getting a proper position at HHM despite bringing the slam dunk case.
And this was a top 10 anime betrayal.
So I want to also mention one more thing before we get into this conversation. So when we're back in this we're back in this conference room, and it's the same conference room we had at the very beginning.
They always use, yeah.
Yeah. I just like to point out that like Jimmy is now like positioned at the head here, and he has that kind of like circle around his head,
The
like
halo?
the halo that Hamlin had when we first saw him, kind of thing. So it's more of that like kind of the saint coming home kind of deal, or like just the saint at the table.
Before getting too deep into Chuck and Jimmy, we need to talk here again. Howard is taking this heat while Chuck is in the room pretending like he agrees with Jimmy. What a good friend or just worker, where he's like, I will take the heat for this. And this is the point where you also realize that he was taking the heat for Jimmy all the way back when he was the one that had to break the news that Jimmy wasn't going to be working at HHM. This whole time he's been taking all this hatred from Jimmy, even though he wasn't really the bad guy, which I just love.
God, it had to really kill Howard having to be the bad guy.
I feel like it really. I think that Howard like was okay with was okay with things because I can reasonably assume that like, hey, I don't want my brother working here because conflict of interest, and he does have a lot of experience. I'm like, all right, I can understand that. I'll take the bullet for you and go talk to him about things. And
then he took the bullet for him for years, though. Jimmy called
Howard
a pig fucker like in episode 2.
Yeah. I feel like over time, and it comes up relevant, I think, the end of this episode or the beginning of the next episode, and Howard's just like, I think you're a good lawyer for what you did and everything, and I think I would have brought you on if I could.
I could just go on and on about how well Howard is written as a subversive character, because there's also like in the next scene, Kim confronts Howard, and Kim, for the first time in the season, admittedly says that Jimmy's her friend. If you notice in previous encounters, she tries to dance around that when it comes to a professional level. They're meeting in the dark underground. She won't tell Howard that they're as close as they are, and she openly says it. She's like, I think you did something wrong to my friend. And Howard, with all this pressure on him, snaps at her. He's like, you know what, just keep it to yourself. And he immediately feels bad about it. As she's walking out, he tells her to come back in. He tells her the truth, and Kim will then meet Jimmy at the nail salon, and she's too heartbroken to tell Jimmy the truth because it's genuinely too harsh of a betrayal. So she just says, take the deal. Ignorance is bliss here. Which, man, that's good stuff.
This is where you know that there kind of had to be something more going on, because
Mm-hmm.
If Kim was going to change her mind, as much as she cares about Jimmy,
Yeah,
there had to be something
and I
big
think like
going
too
on
is
here.
like that. There's no substantial evidence now, which is kind of ironic now because they're lawyers and that's what you need in the courtroom to justify Jimmy not working at the company and Jimmy
Yeah.
not being qualified enough or experienced enough or know how to do it because this is a huge case.
Yeah, he brought a
Yeah.
huge slam dunk.
At this
Yeah.
point, I knew there was no way the reasoning was, oh, he's not good enough. Because if Howard had told Kim that was the reason, she would have been like, no, fuck you.
Yeah, she
like,
would have fought it. But here she looks defeated, and
yeah,
Jimmy figures out that he had a missed phone call or like a deleted phone call the night before.
fuck.
And the most important scene of season 1 starts, where Jimmy shows up and he's like, you could threaten to leave if you really want me to work, if we really want us to work together. And Chuck is like, well, I don't know if it'll work. He's like, come on, Chuck, you have all the cards. You're a superstar over there. If that's what you really want. And then Jimmy just explodes. He's like, it was you. You're the one who called Howard that night. You're the one who told him to not let me work with you guys. And Chuck is just kind of taking it, but then the very important lines come out where Chuck just lets loose, you're not a real lawyer.
God, dude.
This line, you can tell that he's been holding that sentiment in for years. This is really the perfectly structured episode. Well, if you combine it with that flashback from 8, because it tells this full story and it really fills in some really good gaps. There's some really fantastic other lines here where Chuck says, I worked my ass off to get where I am, and you go to that phony school, now you think you're my peer? So that's very condescending, but also you kind of get where he's coming from away.
And man, after this, if you go back to that scene where Jimmy initially tells him the news that he passed the bar, like at the time, the first time you watch that scene, I'm sure you can already kind of tell that Chuck is like, yeah, I mean, okay, you did it. But now it's just even more sad. And this, getting this now, obviously this was always going to be something extremely hurtful to Jimmy. But I feel like it's even more hurtful now than if it happened like 7 or 8 episodes ago.
Because Jimmy's proven himself now.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
The core of Chuck's argument here is like, you're a phony lawyer. You're always going to be slipping Jimmy. You do all this shady stuff. And, for maybe the first half of the season, Jimmy really was still doing a lot of that shady stuff. But the past few episodes, he's been busting his ass, and he's a bona fide, he's a good fucking lawyer.
Homeboy was in the dumpster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think another point too is this like how hypocritical to go off of with Bradley said how hypocritical Chuck said because he's like it's like I worked my ass off to get to where I was
So
and I'm
did
just
Jimmy.
like so did Jimmy. He
Yeah.
worked in the mailroom for you and worked in the mailroom and with the school as best as he could and he took the bar. Which to me is like it's so dumb to say like you're not a real lawyer, even though he has to take the same exact fucking test.
We haven't gone through the entire conversation. There's more to add. Before we progress, I want to touch back on that scene where Bradley says that Chuck finds out that Jimmy's going to become a lawyer. When you first watch that scene, you can view Chuck as being surprised, where he's just like, "Oh, I didn't know you had it in you." But when you watch it now, you're like, "Oh,
it looks like horror."
But it wasn't really surprise. It was a look of horror, of disgust, of like that can't be real. And with the next line, you get it. I know who you are. You're slipping Jimmy. Slipping Jimmy, I can handle just fine. But slipping Jimmy with a law degree is like a chimp with a machine gun.
Fuck.
This is borderline, maybe the most important line in the whole series. Because we know who Jimmy becomes. That's kind of the brilliant part of the show. You know the end point. Joe doesn't know.
Fuck, I guess, man, now that you mention it.
Right? He says, the law is sacred. If you abuse that power, people get hurt. You know I'm right. There's so many layers because it's like, you're being such an asshole, but we know that at the end of the day, you were right.
But
No.
But at the same time, imagine if he didn't say that, actually believed Jimmy,
Yes,
and
that's the
continued
other
on.
layer. Did Chuck create Saul by
Yeah.
pushing Jimmy away?
What Chuck is saying, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy because he's like, you'll never be a real lawyer, and it's like, because you won't let him be a real lawyer.
Oh my god, guys.
Oh,
This
that's
is
so
the
good.
same scene as when Palpatine's shooting lightning out Mace Windu and Anakin.
It's not. It's super not. We're going to revisit this scene midway through season 2, more or less, because there's even more layers. We shouldn't spend too much time now. This scene's gonna reverberate throughout the whole show, but there's also a hint of like, where was I gonna go with that? Okay, we were talking about the good criminal and the bad law-abiding.
A good criminal.
Jimmy gave the money back because he felt it was the right thing to do. I would argue Jimmy is a good crook right now. I would even say he's full blown out criminal, though he has like done some bribes and some big cons. Chuck is the epitome of the law. The law is sacred is something he says. Yet, as a person, Chuck is so rotten to where he's been backstabbing his brother for years. The brother who takes care of him with his incredibly invasive illness. Jimmy's there every day, bringing the paper, bringing the food, checking up on him every single day. That is a horrible, horrible thing for Chuck to do. But on the side of the law, he's the most law-abiding person and most knowledgeable in the law that you could be. So I feel like this is a perfect example of what Mike was talking about in a completely separate storyline. Bradley, you've used the word sublime in the past, and I feel like sublime needs to be very carefully used. Arc 30 is sublime. This scene's also sublime.
Yeah, this scene is probably my favorite in the show up to this point. And don't get me wrong, I really like episode 10 of season 1. I would have been really cool with this being the season finale.
Yeah, this is absolutely the climax. There's no denying that this is the climax of season 1.
Yeah.
Big climax energy.
Anyways, moving on. Chuck,
Well,
what
it's
you
definitely the
got?
climax. Oh god, what was? And Steel Ball Run. That's what I was thinking of.
Ooh,
Sorry. Steel Ball Run. Valentine versus Johnny is definitely the climax of that whole story, and then the following actions, Dio and
Whoa.
Diego and. Sorry, whatever. But High Voltage is the ending of that. But I feel like they're both important because we have to see how that climax immediately affects our protagonists at the end of this story.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? So that's why I think it's important to have this kind of backlash scene. Anyways.
All right, 110, Marco. So it begins with Marco's trick. He's tricking a guy by himself. Jimmy shows up. He tells him he's leaving Cicero because he just... So if you've forgotten the timeline here, Jimmy does the Chicago sunroof.
Yes.
We've gone over... I skipped that, didn't I? The Chicago sunroof.
I think that's in this episode when he describes it.
That's into this. Okay, so Jimmy had just done the Chicago sunroof. Chuck bails him out. It seems like they've been estranged for a couple of years, but Chuck still comes through for his brother. So that adds even more tragic layers because Chuck went out of his way to save Jimmy and give him a job. Oh, it's tragedy, man. Jimmy now is kind of forced to flip his life around because he got a second chance through Chuck, and he's leaving. Following scene, you get Jimmy taking the deal from Howard. This has that quote that Joe was just bringing up where he's like, Jimmy, I always liked you. I used to call you Charlie Hustle. So you get this reveal that Howard did always like Jimmy despite his brother's meddling. But Chuck is the second half of Hamlin McGill. So he has to listen to his requirements and kind of be his puppet.
Like Hamlin McGill. Is there a third Hamlin or second
It
Hamlin?
was Howard's dad who has passed away.
Oh, okay.
I believe there's a scene, I think when Kim's going off on him, Howard brings up that it would have been nepotism to give Jimmy a job, and then Kim is like, "Huh, what's the other H in HHM again?"
Yeah.
Big fucks.
Big bucks.
Jimmy loses it at bingo, and we find
Oh
out
man, that was rough.
this scene is rough. You find out what the Chicago sunroof is.
Yeah, and this is like a masterfully uncomfortable scene.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd be able to write something that makes me so uncomfortable.
It's fantastic. Like, what would you think is the symbolism of them getting B over and over again? I would say it's because it reminds him of brother. I think he even says it, and he just keeps getting it over and over again. It's like, oh my god, even when I'm doing bingo, I can't escape the feelings that I'm feeling right now.
I wasn't sure until he said "be like in brother," and then each successive B, I was like, "Oh fuck, this is killing him."
Yeah.
Yeah, and when
And
he's
it's
like,
I felt really bad with Jimmy in here.
yeah, he's like, I didn't know that his kids were in the car. Who leaves Cub Scouts part in a double parked car? He wanted soft serve. I gave him soft serve. Oh my god.
I felt really bad in Jimmy here, because it's like Jimmy made a big decision in his life to basically change his entire life based off of one person, and like go and try to like correct it for one thing and focus on one thing, and it kind of like realizing his whole motivation, basically, as it's revealed towards the end of this season, his whole motivation to be a lawyer was essentially to do his brother proud, was to kind of be like, to prove to his brother that I can be a better person. I'm not slipping Jimmy anymore. I can, be a lawyer just like you. Like, that's his whole motivation. He looks up to his brother, basically, and now it's just basically crushed because he realizes he's never going to get that.
Yeah.
Regardless of what he does, and it's just kind of crushing that, and it makes him resent everything he's done in the past because it's pointless now.
To the point where he leaves his life as a lawyer this episode, goes back to Cicero, reconnects with Marco, and goes on an extended con bender that lasts.
Big fucking binge.
I believe they say it goes on for a whole week, and you get very. I don't even know what the style is, but I've seen it in The Simpsons. That style of montage, you know, it's I don't know what that style necessarily is, or like what era. It feels like a '80s thing, but I don't know. Notably in this scene, Marco is right back where Jimmy left him, and there's people like that just exist, like. Yeah. You leave and you go to a better place, but they stay in that hole that you guys were in together, and they never leave.
Those are my friends here and Katie.
I had a feeling. I think so. Oof.
I love them to death, but man,
I really hope that you share this lovely podcast with your friends.
I don't.
We find out that Jimmy at one point came back to Cicero, but didn't connect with Marco at the time. Which is just harsh. Like, Marco is just Jimmy's reminder of being Slippin' Jimmy, but at that point he was the hardworking mailroom boy because he wasn't practicing yet. So there's that. Jimmy invents the Nigerian prince scam here. Oh my god!
Bradley, you're alive?
Yeah.
That was you, I think, Joe. I don't know what that was.
Was it? No, I heard it too. It was from Bradley.
I didn't hear anything.
Okay, yeah. You just killed us. That's all. There was like a little mic feedback for some reason. So Marco dies in this next heist. He was shown to have bad health throughout the flashback, and Jimmy, after the funeral, returns to his previous life, but he keeps the pinky ring. Which, Bradley, you might recall, Saul wore that ring in every season of Breaking Bad, in every scene that he's in.
Yeah, I think there's a few things in this episode that call back to Breaking Bad,
Kevin
the
Costner.
The Kevin Costner chick.
Yeah. We also found out that we found out this episode that Jimmy had an ex-wife, allegedly, he says.
Yeah. Yeah, they dropped that, and I was like, I had no idea.
Now, in Better Call Saul, I believe Saul says he had 2 ex-wives. So either it's all a lie, or we're going to see some shit in the future. Who knows? What do y'all think of Marco dying here?
I was a little confused at first, but I forget. learn exactly like physically what killed him?
It was a heart attack.
I thought it was a heart attack. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because I knew like symbolically what killed him is that his friend is gonna have to leave again.
Well, I felt it was more like he even says it. He doesn't have anything to live for. He's he's like a slipping Jimmy who didn't find any further passions and just had to go on through life without his slipping partner. And that's
kind of where I was. I think you phrased it better, where it's like he didn't realize he may have knew he had nothing to live for, but I think this was like the final nail in the coffin. So to speak.
Yeah. When I first watched this season, this episode left me a little weird because of that death. I was like, oh man, is that too convenient? Or is that just the right amount of tragic? I lean more favorably these days because thematically speaking, I'm like, all right, I like it.
I think the big thing is like the big takeaway here was that, Jimmy changed his entire life for Chuck to make Chuck proud. He moved to where Chuck lived. He worked in the mailroom. He got a law degree. He started his own firm. He did everything he could to make Chuck proud. But then he comes back to his hometown, meets up with his old buddy, and he's immediately happy to see him. They go and have a great time, and he fits right in, and he feels wanted. And I think that's like the big thing of like Jimmy coming to realization that like he's not wanted by Chuck or Chuck's people. Like he's wanted by these kind of people.
Yeah, fair. Jimmy, with the help of both Howard and Kim, they get Jimmy in with Davis and Maine.
Yeah,
and they're helping out with the case for Sandpiper. Or no, that might not be the case. Either way, they get him in, and Jimmy goes there, and what we see is that he then drives away and he looks at Mike. It's like, correct me if I'm wrong, but did we have 1.5 million on our tables the other day? Like, why did I give it back? And Mike is an honorable person. He's like, I got paid for a job and I did it. So what made you not take it? And Jimmy says, I know why I did it back then. I'm not going to let that stop me again. And then he drives off and the series ends. Or so the writers, they wrote an ending where it could be like, oh, this is all you need to really know about this story. You can kind of extrapolate where he goes from here. Thankfully, they were super wrong, and they had to write 5 more seasons of gold. But we did it. We finished season 1 of Better Call Saul.
Thank God. I'm excited. I can't wait for season 2.
Yeah.
It was a fun final conversation with Jimmy and Mike, where you can tell Mike kind of has a distinction between honor and maybe what like the right thing to do is, so to speak, where it's not that it's not that he's against taking that money. It's just, to him, the honorable thing is to follow his duty, and his duty was not to take the money. His duty was to complete the job.
Let's say that if we're looking at this square of good and bad, lawful and evil, Mike is in the honorable crook side, at least as we are right now, as we see him right now, and he really tries to live by it. He has his own code and he sticks to it. But yeah, what did y'all? I think I already asked what y'all thought of the season. This is easily the worst season of Better Call Saul, and it really is. You can ask anyone; they're like, "Oh my god, it gets so much better every season." And I really like this season, especially on rewatch. So, season 2 is freaking amazing, and then season 3 and 4 are somehow even better than that.
Yeah, I think the one sentence in the show that gets me most excited for the future is what Jimmy says right at the end, where he says, "I'm not gonna let that stop me again," because you're like, "Oh fuck, what's he gonna do now?"
What's cooking? Well, I think that's good for now. Thank you for joining us. This episode will not be lost.
Yes.
Tune in next week where we recap the last 7 episodes of the season.